This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another one of our world-famous speaker series. Today is the 19th of June. We're over the halfway point, and we're here with Darcie Bays, who's the founder and owner of Scatacon Services, Inc. She's over 20 years of experience in the natural gas industry, specializing in the design, integration, programming, installation, troubleshooting, all of it almost. She also deals with the commissioning of SCADA and the control systems for pipelines, metering, regulation stations, compressor stations, underground storage facilities, and much, much more. Darcie graduated with a Bachelor's of Science degree in Industrial and Systems Engineering from Virginia Polytech Institute. And now she's serving as a project manager and control systems consultant for Scatacon projects. So, wow, you do a whole ton of things, don't you? Well, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Darcie.
Thank you so much. So yes, as Chuck said, I'm in control systems for natural gas. So I'll just give you a brief, I guess, explanation of what we do, what the job entails. And it is a little bit of everything, which is great because I'm a little bit ADD, so I can't really sit still for too long, which is great because we're constantly doing something different. No day is the same. Today is a work from home, obviously outdoors, not just due to the COVID situation. I'm fortunate to be able to work from home like this, even when I'm not in the field. So although we have a small office, we've got 3 full-time engineers, a couple part-time engineers, and we're all able to work from home when we're not working on a customer's job site. So the job basically is control systems. So we design and build systems that control facilities. They allow people to control facilities from computer screens. So that entails a little bit of every kind of engineering. We're doing a little bit of mechanical engineering, electrical, computer engineering, software. We do communications, design and installation, so data that needs to go from California to Boston, for example. We help implement the infrastructure to get that going. It would probably be easier for me to show a few photos, Chuck.
Sure, let me I can make you share the screen here. 1 second.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, thanks.
No problem. Yep, so you're all set. So the bottom button that says screen you could hit in order to share.
Oh, perfect. Let's see. All right.
Wow.
Can you see this?
Oh boy, can we?
Okay. All right. Good. So this is a control room, a typical control room for our customers. This is the end result. So these screens are a compilation of all kinds of programming and then electrical wiring out to field devices all over the country in some cases. So we're responsible for supplying the hardware, building all of this, and then programming behind the scenes there to get all of the information back to an operator who mans the station 24/7. They also have the ability to control every device out there. So they have these big engines that are moving gas into and out of underground storage or through 42-inch gas pipelines up to Canada. They're able to open and close valves, operate the engines, and monitor all kinds of things out there. They also have video surveillance, so we design camera systems so that they can visibly monitor all of their remote sites and they don't have to have someone there at all times. Let me see if this will, oh, there we go. So just briefly, the project, a typical project for us, we help review the basic designs, the one line for the piping, the layouts for the room. This is the data acquisition room, so that's where all of our control equipment is housed. We do different sketches for networking, and then some of the specific wiring for our industrial PLCs or programmable logic controllers. These are, my camera's still on probably, right? I
Yep.
don't know if it will work, but so this is a typical very small but very powerful industrial computer, and we do a whole bunch of programming in the background to for safety systems, for the controls, for somebody to click on a valve, and then it tells that computer to send an electrical signal to move the valve. Here's a basic electrical drawing. We usually have 50 to 100 drawings on a typical large site that we're responsible to review and mark up and get them accurate so that when the installation happens, everything's good. We build these control panels. Sometimes we build them in-house, sometimes we outsource them to a panel fabricator. So these are different components that here's the industrial computer I just pointed out, and then we've got all these different devices that are responsible for different activities. That is not me. So those get installed in the field. Here's our industrial computer. And then we've got all kinds of wiring out of the control panel. You can see my laptop there. We have to do a lot of field programming and testing to commission these facilities. Sometimes we're handed a rat's nest of wiring, and we've got to sort those out for older facilities that we're upgrading. This is a typical facility in the background. These orange things are valve actuators, so we've got all of our programming and then electrical wiring to operate these valves, open and close, to route the gas different ways through this facility. Here's a test bench. This is where we configure all of the remote equipment. So we've got hundreds of transmitters and devices and things that we've got to get programmed and configured prior to their installation. As you can see here, we're programming the processor to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich automatically here in the upper left.
I'm impressed.
These are the screens that we program. So this is where I tell people we kind of build video games for real life. So this is not, unfortunately, a dynamic screen, but these little red and green graphics here, that they're valves, and they can click on them and it will open up a massive valve out in the field and allow gas to flow one way or another. This is a typical engine, so the graphics we're designing, if the fan's actually running, you'll see it spin. If the engine's running, you'll see the pistons firing. And then they've got all these other items to monitor. I do get to go out offshore sometimes, which is great.
Oh,
They've
wow.
got rigs that they'll fly me out to, and my colleagues to program some of the equipment out there, which is pretty cool. We work in all kinds of areas. This is Northeast Colorado. So these gas wells are out in the middle of nowhere, but it's pretty. This is the hills of California. Tornado sighting out in Colorado. Sometimes we have our little mishaps. We have some fun on site. And that's that for photos. I guess, should I speak a little about my career path that led me here, Chuck?
Sure, yeah. I mean, because definitely one of the questions was, did you ever want to really go into this growing up? Did you dream of being an engineer, or did you want to be something else? And how'd you get here?
Okay, that's great. So when I was younger, I definitely liked to fix things and take things apart, like our old rotary phone. And I used to get into all kinds of trouble because I'd take apart like the toaster oven, and my parents would, come home and say, "What are you doing here?" And I'd have to figure out how to put it back together. One of my first jobs was at Jiffy Lube because I wanted to have the opportunity to get my hands and learn a little bit about cars and the internals and how all that worked. So engineering was definitely a path that I knew I wanted to take. I will say that I had a college counselor who tried to deter me from that. Back in the 90s, I don't think it was as common for women to become engineers, and they were trying to direct me toward more of an accounting or a business type of role. But
Well, you showed them.
well, I ended up going into an engineering program at Virginia Tech. I enrolled first in aerospace engineering. I was a straight A student all through high school, and studying came very easy to me. But in college, my first physics class, I failed it extraordinarily. And I thought, for aerospace, you know, somebody who's designing planes, would I really want to fly in a plane with someone, you know, designed by someone who failed physics? No. So I ended up changing my major my junior year, and that's one thing I really want to I really want to speak about, is the fact that it's never too late. So I'm really thrilled that I changed my major even that late in my schooling. I moved to a industrial and systems engineering program, and although it focused more on manufacturing productivity and efficiency, it also dealt with systems, which somewhat corresponded to the job that I was working, my summer job, part-time. So sort of in parallel with that, I started working for a natural gas company, my dad's natural gas company. As a matter of fact, he was a supervisor there, and there was an opening for a summer job. It wasn't something I planned to do forever, but I sort of fell in love with the gas business and networked and started to meet other people and people who were doing actual engineering for pipelines and so forth. So I was given the opportunity to work for an engineering consulting firm, and that was a great experience. And I continued that job through college part-time. So my path was a little bit unusual because I already had a job secured before I graduated from college, which was really fortunate. And I really loved it. I loved the work. So once I graduated, I worked for this company full time, doing what I'm doing now, but as an entry-level engineer. I worked for them for about 7 years, and then the situation just became so daunting that I was working maybe 90 to 100 hours a week. The pay wasn't great, so I ended up going to a consulting job at Wyeth Pharmaceuticals, now Pfizer, and great money, terribly boring job. I sat in a closet, elbow to elbow with programmers all day. Great people, but it just wasn't really my, I didn't love it, and I need to be out and about. So I had customers start calling and asking for gas engineering work, and I said, well, I'm not really in that business anymore. Call my old employer. And our group had all left by then. So I was sort of forced to incorporate just myself as a company to work for them, these customers part-time was my goal. But that ended up turning into a full-time gig. And basically I was sort of pushed into owning my own business, which wasn't ever a goal for me. I'm more of a worker bee, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to do this, but it is very, very overwhelming. I've got a couple other people that I've pulled on over the years into our group, and they're great too. The job is more like a double job. So it's running the business, and it's also doing the field work, and the field work is what I love. So moving forward, we're trying to build a little bit of more infrastructure to help drive the business so that us engineers can continue to do the work that we love.
Do you think you'd be able to make a computer to run the business so you could just do field work? Because I mean, I feel like you've done a computer for everything else out in the field.
Automate the business.
Yeah,
I love it. That's great.
You could. It's funny how you mentioned how your counselor or your guidance counselor or whomever was trying to steer you in a different direction. Because one of the questions I had was, even when you were going through what you wanted to do, did you see many women who were going in that path? Or were you one of the few?
I was one of the very few. Aerospace engineering in the program I was one of the very few there. Industrial and systems engineering, there were a lot more, maybe 40% women. But now in my industry, it's so rare to see another female out there. I just started working with one for a project. She's in Western Canada, and she contacted me privately and said, wow, this is great. You're the first female that I've met in our whole industry that does a similar type of job. So I also work with the Society of Women Engineers, trying to encourage other women who are, excelling in STEM or interested in STEM to look into engineering paths.
Oh, that's great. We have our first audience participation question.
Yay!
Cynthia would like to know if you do any fracking, and if so, how do you address the environmental concerns?
That is a great question. I work more on the topside facility. So I come in to install physically the items on the top of the well after the fracking process has been complete. But I'm fortunate to work closely with all of the geologists and the environmental folks who they've shown me some of their systems that monitor and protect these wells during the fracking process, and then what they do with the materials after the fracking is done, so disposing of the water and everything that they use for that. There are environmental people on the project from day one. So they're environmental engineers that are experts at making sure that we're all clear on what we can and cannot do. And yeah, so that's about all I can say on that.
All right, thank you. What would you say would be maybe one of the biggest projects or the most rewarding projects that you've done so far?
Probably a natural gas compressor facility in Colorado. That's one of the photos I showed of the wind farm. We were out in the middle of cornfields, and this was a massive project. We installed 4 7,000 horsepower engines, and those drive compressors that compress the gas to be able to push it all over the place, underground into these natural gas wells. I think we had like 20 different wells, and each one of those well sites has all kinds of control equipment that we had to install on top. So I worked on that project for about 2 years, and to see it at its completion was really rewarding.
Has there been any like really difficult projects, or with seeing everything you showed us and the big wall of monitors and how little computers operate so many different things, has there been any movie-worthy incidents that were kept under control, or have you had anything happen like that? It just seems like so much in such a little space.
It's a lot, and yeah. There've been a few, more than a few mishaps, but safety is always the #1 concern. So fortunately, we've never had anything life-threatening or catastrophic occur. We've certainly had issues where I typed in an alarm set point and I forgot to add a 0, and it caused all of the gas in one facility to be pushed out to this flame pit where it's lit on fire, and there's a 60-foot flame that results in that. So, and coincidentally, it's right next to a skydiving place. So we had skydivers falling and seeing the 60-foot flame, and that's probably the worst that I've experienced. It was pretty traumatic for me.
Now, starting up this whole business, were there any adversities or like hurdles that you had to overcome in order to get really going? I know how you said you wanted to kind of start as maybe like a part-time gig, but once it happened, was it a completely different world than what you were used to?
Absolutely. I had no idea what I was getting into. I think the biggest thing that I learned was to find a good accountant and a good business attorney. So, because this was a whole new world for me. So dealing with insurance, I had to get insurance policies that were huge. And my insurance agent was a little local guy, a little local agency. And at one point he finally said to me, I feel like I'm dealing with the mafia here, trying to get these insurance policies that are millions of dollars. And state taxing. We have to file income tax for the company and individually in every state that we physically work in. All kinds of business issues that still, my strength is knowing what phone number to call.
Wow. How many states do you work in? And I know you mentioned Canada as well, but how many states have you worked in?
I think we've worked in 22 or 23 different states, and then a few different provinces in Canada. We do very little overseas just because the international jobs are really, there are so many requirements and limitations and hurdles to get past. We have so much work here domestically that we haven't wanted to really expand internationally.
What else are you passionate about? Like, I know how you like being out in the field and getting your hands dirty, but is there any, like, do you even have time for hobbies or something fun?
Great question. I'm sort of just starting to get into all that. So,
Okay. So the dust is settling from starting the business and then, yeah, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spend a lot of time with family. I moved all over for about 20 years, moved wherever the job took me. So I'd live someplace for 5 or 6 months, maybe up to 2 or 3 years. And now I'm back home in New Hampshire, nearby my family. So we spend a lot of time together. I'm able to do a lot of cooking, which is great. On the road, that's very difficult. And I actually just signed up for a motorcycle course. So I think that's going to be my new thing, my next thing.
And then that'll be good wherever you go, more or less, I think.
Yeah.
Does there tend to be like a better place to work in, like geographically speaking, out of all the states that you've worked in and also Canada, is there like a better place to work in where more gas is available?
Let's see.
Do you really have to work hard at one spot in order to, get gas
No,
going?
and that's a great point. Basically, anywhere that we travel for work is very rural. Nobody wants a gas pipeline through their city neighborhood, right? So but I'm not sure people realize how expansive the natural gas pipeline network is. And I wish I'd thought to grab a picture of the transmission lines. These are the big lines that are exchanging gas from pipeline owner to pipeline owner. It's literally a huge spider web of pipelines across the country. So really, we would focus more on where the shale gas is, where there are large amounts of gas that we can produce, bring up, process, and then we can reuse that for storage of, put gas back in the ground, basically just store it until someone else wants to buy it. There are a few big spots like that around the country, but we're lucky that pretty much anywhere we've got tons of work.
Now, it's funny, a lot of people are probably sitting at home going, geez, well, first, I never knew gas came from the ground, or better yet, you can put gas back into the ground for storage. How does that work?
It's a really cool process. And when I first heard about it, I pictured a big open tank, basically, underground, right? But as it turns out, it's a very porous rock. And one of the geologists actually brought me a piece of it at one point, and it looked like a sponge, really, and teeny tiny little openings where the gas is stored. But it's so vast that they can store millions of cubic feet in one well. So but the problem is it's so far underground that the pressure, when you have the gas in the well, usually the pressure is so great that we can just pull it up, no problem. But then once that well is depleted, in order to refill it with gas, we have to pressure the gas up. That's why we have the engines, which drive the compressors, which pressure up that gas and just push it back down there. So it's kind of like the stock market. They're constantly selling and buying gas, and different pipelines are buying and using other pieces of the gas system owned by all kinds of different companies, and they're using that to transport and then selling it to the end user, and it's pretty crazy.
Who owns the land that you stuff the gas back into? Is it other companies?
It's typically individuals, private individuals.
Okay.
And they're the landowners, and that can be quite a challenge for some of these projects because sometimes the landowners are thrilled because they're making money off of leasing that property. Sometimes they're not so happy because maybe they don't own the land, they're right next door and they're not getting profits from this work. But yeah, that's always kind of you never know what you're going to get.
That's true. So who then owns the gas later for extraction, or like when it comes back out? So like, do you own it on the way back in, and then it's owned by somebody indirectly, and then it comes back out, but it's owned again by somebody else?
Pretty much. So when it's in the storage,
Mhm.
and again, these would be my customers, but when it's in the storage in the ground, it's their gas. They own it. They have bought that gas and put it in the ground. And then maybe their pipeline coming out connects to one company, PG&E, for example. But Calpine Gas Storage up in Canada wants to buy that gas that's in the ground. So my customer will sell that gas to PG&E. PG&E will charge a transportation fee for the gas that is delivered from their pipeline up to Calpine. And then Calpine will purchase that gas from them and pay the transportation fee. It's constant all over the country. I mean, this is every day. They're moving gas back and forth, maybe in and out of storage 2 or 3 times a day.
Wow. That's who would have thought that, that much went into gas, because so many people just turn on their stove and then you're good to
Right.
go. Yeah, right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Oh my goodness. Where do I see myself, or where would I
Yeah.
like to see myself?
Yes.
Both. Okay. To be honest with you, in 10 years, I'll probably still be doing something similar as far as the actual work. But my pipe dream is to sell the company off in about maybe 4 or 5 years to a larger engineering firm who doesn't have our specialty in-house, and let someone else manage the headaches and the overhead of running the business itself.
Would you then like stick to some field work?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
But probably some more consulting too. So over the last 20 years, or over the last really 5 years, I've had the opportunity to start slowing down my field travel and sending other people out to do the dirty work. But I love the dirty work too, so I'll probably never stop doing that altogether.
That's great. All right, so we're coming up to the end here, but I have one more question for you. Is there any advice you would give anybody in the audience, especially say a young female scout who might be looking towards going into your field?
I would advise a young female scout to find a mentor, someone you can ask questions about careers and studies and education, and because I've got, like I said, I'm associated with the Society of Women Engineers, so I've got a huge network of other ladies who can help with both the education and career issues as well as work-life balance and things like that. So find someone you can talk to.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Darcie. This was great. Thanks for coming in and chatting with us.
My absolute pleasure.
I hope that eventually you can step back from your management role and just play.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Okay.